All right, let's get to how a pro-Israel lobby group spent millions to sway the Democratic Party primaries and how they took a fat L. I have to pee real quick while this plays. I'll be back in a second.
Elections this week, including the Republican Senate primary in Pennsylvania, where we are still waiting to see if the Trump-endorsed celebrity TV doctor will be declared the winner. There's a wild story coming out of a smaller race in western Pennsylvania around Pittsburgh you probably have not heard about. It's in the 12th congressional district, where one lobbying group dumped millions of dollars to try to take down a Democratic candidate in that primary named Summer Lee. Now, with 99% of the vote in, the state representative Lee is ahead by less than 500 votes. Last night, she all but declared victory, although the race has not yet been called, as we wait for a small number of outstanding votes to be tallied. Now, in October, Lee launched her campaign to fill the seat that was being vacated by a retiring congressman named Mike Doyle. And she did it with the support of the Justice Democrats. That's the group that supported New York Congresswoman Alexandria Ocasio-Cortez's first campaign, among others. And Lee maintained a significant lead in the polling all the way through April, when the pro-choice group Emily's List released a survey showing her ahead by 25 points. But then a torrent of outside money started pouring in. And a huge amount of it came from a political action committee for the American Israel Public Affairs Committee, or AIPAC, called the United Democracy Project. Now, The Intercept reports that in less than a month, the United Democracy Project poured more than $1 million into ads in Pennsylvania's 12th district. The bulk of the messaging attacked Lee, though just over $100,000 meant to materials supporting her main challenger, attorney Steve Irwin. In total, listen to this number, United Democracy Project has spent more than $2.3 million in the race so far. $2.3 million in a random congressional primary in a race where the top two candidates spent under $1.4 million combined.
That's insane, dude. That is so fucking psychotic. Now, one of the things that I got to mention that I talked about, who the fuck did I talk? Oh, with Mike from Pennsylvania about with regards to this. So Democratic Majority for Israel and like AIPAC or like AIPAC subsidiaries have been doing this for some time now. They will always go after Justice Democrats. They will always go after like progressive candidates. They don't even necessarily have to like be critical of Israel. They just literally will fucking go after you if you are aligned with other politicians that are critical of Israel. And that criticism of Israel is like literally this much. Okay? It's not even a lot of criticism of Israel. Like you could be AOC and they will, I mean, I guess they don't really rip into AOC as much anymore, but AOC has like time and time again actually defended Israel in the way that she has legislated, right? But one of the things that they used to do was, like in the case of Court Bush, attack a candidate on the basis of their support or, on the basis of their support for BDS or specifically around issues that revolve around Israel. If they're critical of Israel, they would be like, oh, this person is critical of Israel. She's an anti-Semite. But what they realized is like, that doesn't fucking matter to the average voter, okay? And this is meant in no way like to be disrespectful, but first of all, criticism of Israel is not anti-Semitism. Anti-Zionism is not anti-Semitism. So that's number one. Remember that. That's important for us to address, okay? And two, ultimately, literally remove Israel from the conversation and put another country there, and not a single person would in a million years be like, wow, that's completely unacceptable. Like, can you imagine if like the Saudi lobby was straight up like, running. There was like a Saudi lobby firm that were operating inside of America, straight up being like, these candidates that are anti-Saudi are Islamophobes. They're running Islamophobic attacks against Saudi Arabia. Okay, it's really fucked up. It's really, really unacceptable. Like, would anybody give a shit? Would anyone give a shit about that? Like, would that actually change anyone's attitude? Would that change anyone's like, you think people in fucking like Missouri and shit are gonna turn around and be like, what do you mean? Oh my god, I cannot believe that this person is extremely critical of Saudi Arabia. That's crazy to me. Wow, I'm really gonna change my mind on this. Okay, so obviously that didn't work. The original attacks where they were like, oh, she's really, really bad on Israel, didn't fucking work. Oh, Summer Lee versus Steve Irwin. Okay, dude, come on. Come on. Steve Irwin didn't deserve that. Not this Steve Irwin, but like the other one, okay? Who's a national hero. And I'm literally going to fucking talk about Australian politics in a little bit. And you're setting everyone up for failure in that situation, okay? Anti-Zionist Jew with an Israeli passport can confirm everything's fucked up. So, and to think that every Jewish person supports Israel, you're anti-Semitic. Ethan's a great example of someone who doesn't support Israel. See, that's the thing. Yeah, obviously. Ironically, like ultra-Zionists, ultra-nationalists, and like straight-up fucking Nazis who hate Jews kind of align on a lot of these attitudes that claim that the entire international Jewish community is aligned with the interests of Israel. Okay, Nazis say that, and ultra-nationalist Zionists say that. Literally. Anyone else with a fucking brain cell recognizes that that is a psychotic thing to fucking put forward. Anyway, evangelicals only support Israel because the rapture theology. They think only 144,000 Jews will be saved. Yeah, I know. I've talked about this before. So living in Missouri can confirm nobody knows what Israel is here. So basically what ended up happening is like the Democratic majority for Israel decided to no longer just like attack candidates on the basis of like how critical they are of Israel, because they realized that that wasn't a great way to fucking effectively spend all their money. So they decided to like attack Summer Lee on whatever the fuck was important in that campaign. Like, what were some of the things that they were attacking her on? Like, they were saying that she was a spoiler for the Democratic Party. Like, she was a Democratic socialist, and therefore, like, you know, she likes third-party candidates or whatever, and like she's trying to take over the Democratic Party and yada yada yada. Like, so they're not even attacking her on like Israel positions around Israel anyway.
And that's as of last filing at the end of April. And the United Democracy Project, which is a sort of anonymous sounding name, has been dumping enormous amounts of cash in other races too. The Washington Post reports that in Texas's 28th congressional district, quote, it has spent $1.2 million to help Democratic Congressman Henry Cuellar defeat challenger Jessica Cisneros. Last week, in the final weeks of a special election in Ohio's 11th district, United Democracy, combined with other pro-Israel group, quote, spent another $500,000 on ads against progressive Democratic candidate Nina Turner. Now, to be totally clear, there's nothing illegal about this. In the 12 years since the Supreme Court's decision in a case called Citizens United, outside groups and corporations have been allowed to spend unlimited amounts of money in elections. Of course, the concern of those who oppose that Citizens United decision is that there's just something fundamentally corrupt.
By the way, remember when Ilhan Omar got like widespread fucking criticism and even death threats, like a fuckload of death threats, like more than she normally gets, specifically for basically saying things that are a summarization of this entire fucking news article that Chris Hayes is now posting on MSNBC? Just think about that for a second. Remember when people literally were saying like, oh, Ilhan Omar is like such a gigantic anti-Semite for saying like AIPAC has a profound amount of influence over legislation or over Congress. That's crazy. It's wild that the Democrats literally punished her for this. I will never forgive and I will never forget that. It was one of the grossest, most disgusting things that the Democratic Party has done. And they do a lot of disgusting shit.
About a single entity spending at this scale and essentially becoming the dominant player in a race. And it doesn't matter who they are. It could be any group from the ethanol lobby to teachers unions. If the candidate is elected, where a group pours in $3 million, $2.5 million in a race, right? It's pretty clear that person who's elected is pretty beholden, right? They're incentivized to orient their public life around the fact that this particular interest group put them in office. And that's precisely the kind of tacit quid pro quo issue that made Citizens United such a terrible ruling and has wreaked so much havoc in our election system. But there's also something else I find insidious about this particular use of big money.
I'm surprised they aren't reporting this on this, right? Usually mainstream news channels would avoid anything that seems to cast doubt on Israel-based ideologies and funding. What do you mean? It's one fucking broadcast and one broadcaster. It's not the most popular channel. Every other channel is constantly fucking running propaganda and even making assertions or making claims similar to, anti-Zionism is anti-Semitism, yada, yada, yada. It's just, it doesn't even matter because Hayes saying this doesn't really change the game in any meaningful capacity.
Because you see, the United Democracy Project...
It's like me fucking being on Twitch and saying this. You know what I mean? Like, who cares?
...exists to bolster the United States relationship with the state of Israel. It's the issue they care about is whether the U.S. is staunch and unflinching in its support of Israel. And of course, there's an active debate in Democratic policy circles about how staunchly supportive or critical we should be, depending on the actions of the Israeli government, particularly in Gaza and the occupied West Bank. But here's the thing, crucially, that is not the issue that this PAC is engaging in when it gets involved in these races. I mean, if the United Democracy Project, right, wants to spend millions of dollars running ads saying Summer Lee is critical of Israel, and we don't think she should be, support Steve Irwin because he will stand by Israel.
Yeah.
Well, then,
they didn't even do that. They didn't do that because they realized that doing that didn't work with Cori Bush. They straight up tried that with Cori Bush, realized that that fucking failed because people were like, okay, I don't give a fuck. Shut the fuck up, dumbass. And then now they're like, okay, well, I guess like random voters care less about like someone being critical of like a foreign nation in a domestic fucking congressional race. And they care more about like, I don't know, their issues or whatever. And because it's the Democratic Party primaries, they tried to, and these are like active Democrats that vote in the Democratic Party primaries, obviously. If you're voting for a candidate in the Democratic Party's like congressional district primary, you are really tuned in to MSNBC and you are really tuned into the Democratic Party. You're ride or die for the Democratic Party. So they were trying to hit her on like, oh, she's going to be bad. She's not going to work with Joe Biden.
Have at it. That's democracy, at least in the Citizens United version. That's sort of how it works now. But the thing is, they recognize Israel is not the top issue for the voters in Pennsylvania's 12th district. And so what they did instead was launch an almost comically disingenuous attack claiming Lee is not a real Democrat.
She calls herself a Democrat, but Summer Lee said she wanted to dismantle the Democratic Party, dismantle it, and she's done everything in her power to do just that. When Joe Biden was running against Trump, Summer Lee attacked Biden's character, said he'd take us backwards, and Lee refused to support Biden's infrastructure plan that's now rebuilding bridges and roads in western Pennsylvania. Summer Lee, more interested in fighting Democrats than getting results.
The irony of this, the inherent irony of this is so funny as like you're literally a PAC not even working within the interest of your PAC, okay? Like the entire purpose of like PACs is that you're supposed to be not directly attacking a candidate and like only tackling the issue itself. Now they've moved beyond the fucking issue itself and they're just directly attacking the candidate and fighting Democrats and not getting results.
UDP is responsible for the content of this ad.
Wait, why was she against Build Back Brandon? Fucking no shot was she against Build Back Brandon. Get the fuck out of here, dude. Are you stupid? This is a fucking Democratic socialist. Obviously, they probably are misrepresenting what she said.
Wild, right? So here's this group, UDP, you've never heard of. They're saying, like, Summer Lee is bad because she's not a real Democrat. We want authentic Democrats. But they don't care who a real Democrat is. They care about whether Summer Lee is sufficiently supportive of Israel or not. I mean, on the homepage of their own website, the United Democracy Project calls themselves, quote, an organization comprised of American citizens.
She was against a bipartisan deal like we all were. Yeah, she probably was like against a bipartisan deal, wanted the fucking real Build Back Brandon to go, go further. And she wanted to be aggressive or some shit. So they took that and then made it seem like she was against it. The ad said that I was just curious if there was any Smith of justification. No shot. Sorry for coming across as aggressive, by the way. I just mean like when you see ads like this, remember, it's just like it's clip chimping. Like this is what politicians do. This is what political operatives do. They clip chimp and they do this kind of fucking dumb shit all the goddamn time. My interview is about to happen, so I'm going to finish this video and then move on.
Democrats, Republicans, and independents.
I'm going to be talking to the Rolling Stone
that America's
magazine.
Partnership with our Democratic ally Israel benefits both countries. The spokesperson was exceedingly clear about their motivations in a recent statement to the Washington Post, saying, quote, our goal is to build the biggest bipartisan coalition in Congress for the U.S.-Israel relationship. Again, that's their stated goal. That's what they care about. They care about that over everything else, to the point where they have endorsed over 100 Republican candidates who voted to overturn the 2020 election results after the insurrection. And again, it's a free country. That's their right. They can support whoever they want. Okay? But no one should be taking any lectures from them about who and who is not a real Democrat. We should all be really clear about what this is really about, because it's going to keep happening.
There it is.